All right. Welcome back to the Maturity Project. I'm your host, Chad Everett Broshears, and I have a wonderful guest with me today that I'm excited to share. Her and I have known each other now for, actually over a decade. So excited to actually catch up with her. She moved away, and now we've got back in touch, and we've got some things to discuss. So I will let Kinsey go ahead and take over. By the way, if it sounds funny or if you notice a hesitation in me calling her by her name, we're going to talk about that too. So I'll let her take over, introduce herself, and we'll kind of get right into some topics.
Awesome. Well, yeah, my name is Kinsey, and let's start there because we're here. So I met Chad years ago at a BNI business networking group in Florida, and back then I had a different name, and I have legally changed my name about 5 years ago now. So that's why Chad has known me so long that I've changed my name. So it's been an interesting story for me with that too, because that's not a common thing. I mean, I know some people change their names legally, but usually it's a last name and not a first name. So that's been a whole journey for me, but I've been loving living into the name Kinsey, and it feels like it fits me way better. So that's something we could dive into a little bit more too, is that listening to yourself and knowing yourself and maturing through life and making some big decisions and how that happens as well. But yeah, so I'm living here in Texas now. I've lived in Florida, Texas, and Washington State primarily. So I've been around a little bit, and I'm a professional dog trainer. That's another area that Chad knows me by, because I worked with Sugar Bear years ago. That was some good memories. Yeah, so that's just a little bit about me, and we'll dig in deeper. But what questions do you have for me? It's been so long since we've actually gotten to
such a long time. So Kinsey knows me prior to, well, actually right around the timeline I actually started creating this education, the Maturity Project is based in. So, but I discuss it as a excited, ambitious new discovery, but yet still something built off a foundation of what I've recognized in human nature. So I don't believe you and I talked about it much as your dead name now, Cheryl. Sorry. Hopefully that's not a cringy moment to hear that, but So when we were in the business networking group, I was a holistic personal trainer. She's a dog trainer. And we had some interesting similarities, because it wasn't so much training the dogs, it was training the owners. And I worked in training the owners too, but mine was training the owners in the gym, and she trained the owners in the field or at their home or wherever it was necessary to get them to understand how to actually develop their pooch. All right.
Yep.
So we had a lot of interesting human behavior understandings that we interacted with and shared in conversation. So life has happened since prior as well. I believe you were married at the time. And then you moved away to Washington State, which is quite a distance from Florida, and a culture shock and also weather shock, right? So what spurred that move?
Well, you may not have known this, but I actually grew up in Washington State. So Florida was where I moved when I got married, and lived there for a few years. And then at the time, my husband and I decided that Florida was not the place for us. And so then we packed up and moved and went to Washington, which was more my stomping grounds growing up. And so restarting my business, that was a whole thing as well. And then, throughout the years, the divorce was actually part of the legal name change process as well. So but yeah, culture shock. I mean, living in polar opposite ends of the United States, different demographics, different mentalities. I'm experiencing a little bit of that even here in Texas, where it's just every place is a little bit different. And you kind of have to adapt and get a feel for, your surroundings. And even though this is another piece too that I think is really interesting, even though you carry within yourself your own core beliefs or value systems or how you operate in life. And when you move someplace that is a bit different than how you think or what you do or what you believe, you may feel like it's not going to influence you, but it does. And it can be really subtle and sneaky and take time, because there's aspects of me that I would say, depending on the topic, I would lean a little more conservative in some ways. And living in Washington, it's a more liberal state. And so there's a mentality up there that, kind of gets infused in how everyday living happens. And then you pick up on ways of thinking and whatnot that then get normalized. And now living in Texas, which is a more conservative leaning state, I'm realizing the contrast of some things where I'm like, oh, wow. So I'm kind of all over the map and in the middle and all over the place with mentality on things like that too. And it's just very interesting for me to experience, having lived for several years in different locations and noticing the contrast of different ways of thinking and being. And even within, to segue into like my dog training career, totally different mentality around dogs here in Texas versus in Washington State. So as a business owner, that's something that I'm having to adapt to connect with the people, reach the people, and run my business. So it's very interesting to me.
And that's a great point, because as I mentioned, because prior to actually sitting with all of my guests, I'll send them the maturity projects layout, the foundation, right? And I mention each one of the areas in a way that helps people qualify what we're referring to when we're looking at maturity. And what Kinsey's talking about here is, so the business maturity. Now, I've always looked at her as being she is not a startup. Again, I've never known you as a startup. Right. And you've always been a functioning business, because business has a maturity, a timeline. Right. And with that, you have one of the areas of business that people often don't consider that they need to be highly mature in their businesses is how to pivot. And Kinsey's brought up already pivoting. Right. So the clientele in Florida to the clientele in Washington to the clientele in Texas. And how do you get to the point from you and your experience? Because Kinsey's coming from a whole different world than the average person. And I mean, maybe that's a sign with the car rocketing by the house here. I don't know if you heard that or not, but I'm sure.
Oh, no, I didn't hear it.
Oh, my God. That was quite interruptive. But she's different because she's not the average person. Now, you've always stood out to me as being somebody highly mature and very well developed. You have a way of commanding a room without saying anything. And that may be of a consequence of being a dog trainer, or could be the skill sets that made dog training a viable direction for business, because you have these characteristics that align well with that direction of occupation. Right. So whatever that might be, but you've always been very collected, and you analyze the situation. You read it before you react. So going from Florida to Washington to Texas, your ability to pivot will be based in, there will be those variables that are associated with your ability to pivot. So you're going to take in the situation, understand the situation, and then react. But what's curious for me is, how did you get here? So there's plenty of things to talk about that we've already exchanged, because you have some similarities with a previous guest. And I find that the two of you have very similar values and characteristics, traits that make me go, wow, you two are similar, in such a way that makes you remarkable. So with that, I know it's kind of like a lot jumbled up into a statement, but what got you to that, this point in time with your business and your ability to pivot so well?
Thank you for the compliments. My experience of myself throughout life is always, I'm just being me, but I seem to have a very strong inner compass. And so that, I think, is a built-in part of me. And, with that, when you talk about things that are built in or imprinted on you, it's either genetically, like it's just part of your personality, or part of your upbringing. And so my upbringing has had a huge influence in who I've become in some positive and negative ways. And I think adaptability and resilience is a big part of what my childhood prepared me for. So I grew up in a family that was conservative Christian family, going to church every Sunday. One of 6 kids. I'm the middle child. So I was kind of the peacekeeper in the home. And unfortunately for me, my experience growing up in that setting, while there were some positives, some of the negatives was it wasn't the healthiest of church communities, and it wasn't the healthiest of home and family dynamics when it came to like the mental emotional side of things. And so there were aspects of my personality that I believe were developed out of a necessity for survival, mentally. And so that's something that's really shaped me moving forward in life, is looking at a situation and being able to analyze it and assess, what are the potential outcomes? What are the potential pitfalls? How do I want to be as a person? This is a question that I've asked myself throughout my life, is like, what kind of a person do I want to be through this process or through this struggle, or, as I'm envisioning an outcome? And that plays into business, that plays into personal life, because it's all connected. And so from that aspect, I cannot separate who I am from how I operate my business. Because, I'm a small business entrepreneur, so it's very much me in it. And a big part of what I do is relational with my clients and the dogs, and, helping guide a relationship dynamic between 2 species, and, each other too. So there's a lot packed in there, but definitely my childhood has been a huge part of my development. And the positives would be it imprinted on me in that environment some really solid character traits and set of morals, I believe, and value systems that have been, I think, what built that inner compass for me. Because even as I've kind of navigated life through some ups and downs and, gone down a few different paths, there's always that inner part of me that's holding true to some of those value systems and whatnot that's pulled me through some of the tough times.
No, it's like they say is every rock, no matter how strong it is, the stream will mold it. Right. It's just the consistency of the flow. Right. But the rock is still true to being a rock. It just changes its shape. So it's a fascinating thing, and it's the ability to adapt, and it's the wisdom of the ages. Right. And one of the reasons why it's the wisdom of the ages is because it resonates with human being. It's just being a human being. So when you really get to be true to who you are as a human being, your words carry more wisdom with every statement than they would if you're not true to who you are. So it's a fascinating piece, and I would attribute that to also being a part of who I know you to be. Your ability to hold integrity with the person that you are is something that's outstanding, right? And what I mean by that is outstanding, right? It stands outside of the average person. So it's an interesting thing, but it complements more, right? How you do anything is how you do everything. And it's just something that has established itself in the relationship you and I have, is that's how I know you, is you're a person of integrity. You're a person that your life will have mattered, because you're living your life to live it. You're not living your life to just occupy space and time. You're doing it with this purpose, even if it's not something that's a direct declaration on a flag that follows behind you. You are a living testament of that. So with that being said, it's like that also goes into one of the other areas of maturity, and actually it's a combination of areas: it's spirituality, community, and emotion. But the reason why emotion's associated with that combination is because it's how you're a very stoic woman. Right, which is not something you typically hear as a descriptor for a female, is stoicism. But you're a stoic. Which is the tenets of it, is that you speak slow, not slow as in mind, but slow as in reaction. You analyze the situation and you don't react emotionally with significance. You contemplate behavior, and that's the area of significance that you put your energy on. So these are the things, and this is not about like lambasting you with like all of these compliments. It's just that most of the time we don't share who somebody else is with another person. You just house that, you harbor it, but then you just expect that they should know this of themselves. So why I believe that this is something beneficial for the conversation isn't so much that it is about like getting you to recognize who you are, the eyes that I carry, but in the way that is to inspire other people. Find the truth of who you are, not by the music that you listen to, not by the people that you hang out with, although all of that influences you. It is that rock is based off the mineral it is created by, not at the fact that it holds a shape and a specific density that we refer to it as being a rock, right? Because it still has its unique characters and traits. So that's the inspiration for this, is that, look, we're not all intended and we all should not live the same life, because ultimately that would create this nihilistic view of boredom, because we would all experience the same things all the time, and then it would just kind of take away the flavor that life actually offers, the vibrant colors that we can express through experiences. So now back to the main core of the conversation, and not so much of the digression about the recognition portion, but you have it's not an easy business to manage two different species, right? Your dog, the canine, and the human being, right? Because they're of the two, which one would you say is probably the more simplistic?
Oh gosh, the dogs. And I don't mean that they're simple, because they are highly complex, but they're simple in that I think there's less that gets in the way of their willingness to work with you, and the way they think is a little more straightforward. And they do have emotions. They have not as many emotions on the spectrum of emotions as we humans do. And I think that's part of what makes it a little more simple as well. But they're very present, and they don't have the complications of life and taxes and mortgages and, complex relationships and breakups and things. Like, their life is very simple as a domesticated dog. And so in that aspect, it does make them a little more simple to work with. That being said, I specialized in aggression rehabilitation for many years. Those dogs are a bit more complex. So, but humans, we have so much more going on in our world and our minds, and with the trajectory of technology in our culture, we're not very good at being present. So that's a challenge that comes up. So that's
Yeah. And to explore that a little bit more as well, it's like, what can create such a dynamic that makes us lacking presence, right? And we do have such a developed brain that we have the ability to take our previous experiences with you in the timelines that we can pull from and predict into the future based off of present circumstances. And it causes it to be so much more anxiety is living in the future based off experiences of the past. Fantasies are pleasure based, but yet they're still future directed based off of some sort of experiences of the past. We have a lot of reasons to escape our current reality, because most of us aren't also taught how to deal with conflict or how to deal with challenges. What we do is we call challenges issues or problems, and we don't look at them for what they truly are, which I love to tell people. A challenge is a lesson. Now it's whether or not you choose to learn it, because if you choose not to learn it, it's a problem. If you choose to learn it, it's a lesson. Now you have new abilities because you've evolved, you've adapted. So I say that because I feel that when you start looking at, and you can obviously help give some insight on this because this is your area, when you're dealing with aggression, and especially your pets, right, or your canines, there will likely be specific circumstances the dog has gone through that was produced by the owners or the people that are around the owner, the human beings that they've interacted with, because they feed off our energy as well. So would you say that's a pretty truthful statement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we definitely see, it's also a little more complex than that. One of probably my most common saying when teaching my clients is it depends. So there's a lot of factors and variables, but yes, the owners do influence the dog in many ways. It can be directly through relationship, directly through who they are and how they show up, which influences the dog, right? It affects the dog. Just like if you were to be around someone who's an anxious mess, that's maybe going to put you on edge a little bit, versus someone who's like super happy and joyful all the time. You're going to like join in on some of that energy. So in that aspect, yeah. And then how we set up the environment, what's the routine like? Are those dogs' needs being met truly? More than just are they getting food and water and shelter? And then there's experiences, one-off experiences that can set off a whole chain of events or things like that. And then the things that are more subtle that most people don't catch until I teach them are they could be loving their dog in a human way, which can be received in a very different way from the canine species perspective, which can then feed into aggressive type behaviors of, there's many dogs that I've worked with that have never been abused a day in their life. They've been spoiled. And that's what caused their aggression, because of entitlement and control and whatnot. And you get certain breeds and certain personality types that just want to take over. So there's a lot of complexity as to, piecing out why. And you used the word analyze for me a couple of times. And that is something that I really love about my job is every client case is different, and I get to explore it, analyze it, and figure out what's the root of why this is happening. And then I get to teach the person how to understand it, which I love teaching too. And especially when I get a student who is interested in learning, not just to fix the problem, but they really are fascinated by it. That's my favorite client to have. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but there you go.
No, what's interesting is it's relationships and the dynamics of relationships. Dogs are close to us because they have similar emotional expressions and a way of kind of fitting into the puzzle of our life. Because they just have a specific dynamic that creates a companionship that for some people, they don't have the ability to connect with another human being at the depth that creates the satisfaction that gives them that experience of life that is fulfilling. So they fill it with our companions, like our dogs and things, or cats. We find things that at least give us something as a surrogacy in a sense, right? Now, go ahead.
I have something to add to that if I could.
Yeah, please.
My view on why people have dogs. So we have the whole history of tens of thousands of years where we've been hunting together, surviving together, migrating together. Dogs have helped aid us and we have helped aid them, which is why we can co-species so well. Well, now we're not needing them in the same way for survival. We're just needing them for more of that emotional connection. And my theory is why we want dogs now in our lives is because we have become more and more insulated and isolated from nature. And they are connected to nature. So bringing them in our home, bringing plants in the home, those kinds of things, we're trying to reconnect nature, which we are a part of. So there's that piece where it's that connection back to what we are as a species in nature instead of being insulated in our houses and all safe and cozy. And then the second thing is that the relationship dynamic, for the most part, is one that we don't really get to experience human to human, which is unconditional love. And most dogs, not all canine human relationships are that way, but predominantly that's what we know it as, is you come home and your dog is always happy to see you. Your dog never talks back, right? They might sass back a little bit or be a little stubborn, but you work through it and they're always there for you. They don't, they'll always listen to your problems. It doesn't matter how much you complain. It doesn't matter if you forget to take them on a walk that day. They're not going to hold a grudge. Right. And I think that type of relationship dynamic is what people are craving, because we don't get to experience that really with each other, because there's, things that don't always go smoothly in human to human relationships, which I could tie that into the spiritual realm as well of what people are seeking too. If I may continue down this rabbit trail.
Yeah, please. Please. No, I'm following with, because to me, we're missing that part of nature, which is grounding. If you look at the elements, right? And we create static when we're not grounded well, because we have to find meaning. If we don't have meaning, we create meaning. And we create static in the space with uncertainty. And then we create a convincing conversation with ourselves that we know certainty now, but we don't have the fundamental foundation that nature offers. So, but please continue, because yes, right into spirituality. Oh, I love it, because this is all interconnected. So please.
You can't unconnect all these different
That's
parts
playing
of
God.
this.
Trying to disconnect it all is playing God.
Yeah. So, I even recently have been experiencing, just looking back across my life. I'm 36 now. So I've lived a few decades. And I've kind of gone through different phases of, being certain about things, and then having all that crumble down, and then, relearning things or exploring things, and then now having new certainties, and then those crumble down. And I think this is part of life, right? And that seeking, though, and I think that's really what part of the human experience is seeking for answers to fill that void. And a lot of people seek through, drugs, sex, adrenaline rushes, relationships, those kinds of things. And it's usually not enough. There's something missing. And that's kind of where I've gotten to. Yeah. Right. Make all the money, work hard, become a workaholic. I was a workaholic for a long time. I threw everything, all of my time and energy into my work. I loved it. It was my passion. It was what I was made to do, work with dogs and help dogs, so it was a good thing, but to my detriment of my own life experience. And, so seeking that balance in life, that work-life balance, right? Like there is no exact balance where you're going to go like, oh, right there. Yep. That's it. No, it's a flow. And so anyways, I think part of people seeking connection through their relationship with their dogs, or these other areas of life, workaholicism, partying, whatever, at the end of the day, if you dig deep, there's a knowing that it's not satiating. And that's what I've been experiencing even in this last 6 months or so. So a little bit more about my personal life journey is got divorced in 2020. I had been married for about 10 years. And then that relationship ended for a variety of reasons. I became much happier after that. And then I got to explore a little bit more in relationships in life, because prior to that, so going back to my childhood, conservative Christian family, I didn't really date when I was young. And so my husband was the first guy that I ever really dated, and we got married very young. And that was it. I got married, and that was going to be life. We were going to have the white picket fence and the kids and everything. And then reality of life sunk in, and that relationship ended. And so then, here I am in my early 30s, single, and have never really dated before. That's a whole interesting experience. And so part of my spiritual, to connect this back to the spiritual realm, growing up Christian, I got married to a man who had a very similar background as me. And so, we got married, we went to church. And a handful of years into our relationship, one day he just decides he doesn't want to go to church anymore. And that really rocked my world. And that kind of, there was a whole discussion that went with that. But ultimately, I followed his example, and I stopped going to church, and I struggled with that for a while. And then right around the same time, I started having some issues with my parents, and I sought therapy for the first time for that reason. And of course, in therapy, if you have a good therapist, they unpack everything in your life. And so through that came an unraveling of my spiritual realm as well. And that's when I saw through therapy some of the toxicity in the particular churches and whatnot that I was raised in, and the damage that it had done. And so that was an interesting turning point in my life where I was like, you know what, screw all that. That's pretty messed up. Like I'm going to walk away from that now. And so I spent, several years walking away from that and exploring the world like everybody else gets to. And, try things and do things and think differently. And in some ways it was very freeing. But I hit a point where, I was drinking a bottle of wine almost every day. Watching a lot of TV, doing nothing. My relationship was tanking. I was trying everything I could, but I had a partner who was not willing to participate in working on things in the relationship. And so then that ended. And now I'm thrown into the dating realm at 31-ish years old.
Yep. In 2020.
Yeah.
Right.
In 2020. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
it's noteworthy.
Yeah. And because of my previous upbringing, I had certain standards of, especially in the sexual realm. But because I had walked away from that, I was like, you know what, I'm going to try this one night stand thing that everybody's talking about. That's such a great thing. I figured out really quick, that's not for me. That's quite damaging to the soul. And, very interesting learning experience, I would say. So, and I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing it because it's a biblical thing or whatever. It's just, I just felt in myself, like, that's not good for me. And so, it was an interesting balance of learning to trust intuition and really be sensitive to figuring out my journey without being influenced by everyone being like, oh, it's fine. Everybody's doing it. This is how it is. Have fun. If it feels good, do it.
Hedonism.
All those narratives. Yeah.
Sexuality is an area of maturity. And most people, most people have the wrong idea of maturity as a whole, let alone each area. You bring up sexuality and they're like, oh, okay, body count is good, right? Like being able to just say, okay, I can cut this person off. I don't care. It doesn't make a difference. Well, what do you sacrifice by doing so? Like a one night stand is it's vacuous of emotional connection, right? It's all about the simplicity of the fantasy and the sensation of physical touch and the release that can come from that. But when you come back to your senses, you have to deal with who you are, and people don't understand that about sexuality, especially
even on a biological standpoint of the bonding hormones and whatnot that happen through the physical act. So you are attaching to that person, even though you're trying not to, and that's damaging to yourself as well as to the other person. I mean, you could choose not to care about the other person, but choose to care about yourself and how that impacts you. And like, you can't remove the biology of what that act is for. And so to me, it's like,
yeah. Well, here's something to add to it, right? So one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about getting this education out there, and when I say this education, it's a very dynamic thing, right? But it is that I see a rise of narcissism and antisocial personality traits that, by the way, I'm not a psychologist and all of that. I went to school for it, and you know what? I appreciate a lot about what the field offers, and I don't like what it's become. Right, because it's become an enabling institution, right? And it's business now. It's not about care and correction, right? And as you said earlier, finding a good therapist. When you said that, I'm like, okay, there's the percentage of good therapists is far drastically lower than it ever has been because of how many people have gone into the field that are solely interested in their own agendas or their business opportunities and not about the care of the individual. So we have this, right? We're talking about that disconnect, right? Well, the hormone, whenever two people are together in a very physical, intimate way, is oxytocin. It's a bonding hormone that brings us together, that makes us create bonds. And when you push yourself and you condition yourself to cognitively separate from that person by using previous pain and the potential of the pain right now that's present because you didn't connect to the level that's necessary to have certainty or at least confidence that the relationship, or it could be considered a relationship, the people lay together and then they find out that there's a disconnect. And then there's I'm just going to separate emotionally. In psychology, that's actually conditions for narcissistic traits. That's all about me at this point, and you are at consequence to my needs. So if I don't need you, I can walk away from you, and I will use you for what I can maintain. So as we do anything, we do everything. And we're conditioning ourselves. And then what do? We have the bullhorn of social media, where we can take this out there and be like, this person ain't shit, and all the rest of this stuff. And men are toxic, and, down with the patriarchy, and all these things are the complexities of this convoluting nonsense of making meaning to things that build into these philosophies that lead people astray from actually creating a fulfilling life. So we're talking about something so incredibly beneficial to understand, because what do one night stands do? There is a significant cost associated with it. One of that is that it starts turning you. No matter how solid the rock, the stream will mold it. Right. Yeah. So anyway, I thank you for letting me explore that a bit more, because this is a reality that people are dealing with. And we have more and more people out there that are complaining and so angry that they're lonely, not realizing they created that loneliness, but they didn't do it consciously. They did it indirectly because they've been guided by people that are not mature enough to guide.
Yes. The blind leading the blind. The concept of choice is a huge theme in my life. And this is one that my therapist sort of slapped me upside the head with at one point. And to circle it back to, it came through business for me, but it applies to life, even in the sexual realm too. As you do one thing, you do all things. So a quick story on that, because I think for me, it was quite profound, and it may be helpful for someone else, is, in my business, I started specializing over the years in aggression rehabilitation, as I mentioned. So I'm working with the difficult dogs. I'm working with the dogs that 5 other trainers have worked with and failed. I'm working with the dogs that are on death row. If we cannot fix their behavior, they will be killed, because they cannot live safely in a human society and, put humans at risk or risk of killing other animals. So those dogs will die if we don't fix this. And so for years, those were the clients that I'm working with, and high levels of stress, high levels of complex, dangerous behaviors. And I loved it for many reasons, because to add back in, I was healing myself through the process of healing these dogs, because I felt misunderstood. I felt underfulfilled. I felt unseen. I felt mishandled. I felt angry as a kid. I was the aggressive dog. And I didn't know that until I went to therapy, and my therapist started unpacking these things. And, I was like, why are you so passionate about working with these aggressive dogs? And I was like, I don't know, I just like it. And then we dug in, and it was like, oh, wow, I'm actually, like, through resolving this in so many different families, I'm healing myself. Well, what happened in part of my career is I hit a bit of burnout, because I became really well known in that area for being the go-to person for that service. What also happened, because I offered boarding for my client dogs, they could come stay with me while the owners were out of town, that kind of thing. I had many clients who could not leave town unless I could board their dog, because their dog was so dangerous, it could not be boarded anywhere else. So I was the only person in the area that they knew of that could let them go to Christmas with family, that could let them go to the deathbed of their grandparents. If I was unable to board their dog, they could not go to those things. And that put a lot of pressure on me. On one hand, it fed my ego, because I'm important and I can help. And on the other hand, I felt very stuck, and I started resenting my business a little bit. And so I'm complaining to my therapist in a session about how stuck I feel, because now I can't take a vacation, because I'm constantly boarding all these dogs that are difficult dogs, and I love helping them, but, like, I need a break. And, I'm just ranting to her about all this, and she kind of looks at me and she goes, you chose this. And I looked at her and I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she was like, you chose this, and you can choose something different. And I'm like, well, no, I can't. They need me. And so then I was stuck in the, I can't turn them away. I'm the only one who can handle it. Of course, that's my ego, right? They'll find another way if I'm not available, if they really have to or really want to. But, that's the headspace that I was in. But she really brought forth the awareness for me at that time of, you make choices every day that leads you to where you're at in life. And if you're not happy with where you're at in life, you can make different choices and start reshaping the trajectory of it. And it might be that 1% change, right? You make 1% change today, 10 years down the road, you're going to be way over here instead of over here. And so the power of choice and responsibility for where you're at in life it was a huge slap in the face for me at that point, where I was really upset when my therapist pointed that out. And that's a good therapist, because she wasn't always affirming of like, oh, yeah, it wasn't all this like, oh, you poor thing. It was, get yourself out of it. If you don't want to be there, don't be there. You have choice. It's going to be hard, but you get to choose it. You have that power. And that was a huge moment for me that shifted so many things. I mean, even I think that was a pivotal point in me heading in the direction of choosing divorce for my life, because it was not a good relationship. It ended up at a point where it was not a good relationship, and I had choice. And so, you get in this space now as a single woman, in the dating realm, and going back to the dating aspect of things, where, the femininity is now a thing. We've swung to the other end of the spectrum. We got to find that middle ground. But there's a lot of narrative out there about, there's no good men. And I've felt that. I have been in that position of like, wow, I've encountered some not great humans. And yet I have choice. I can choose to become more jaded. I can choose to hold grudges. I can choose to devalue men, them as less than or incapable, or I can choose to look at the world with hope, and I can choose to know that there are good men out there. There might be fewer of them, but I need to conduct myself in a way that makes me desirable to those types of men. And I need to turn within. And this is something that has been a recent self-reflection of, okay, in the dating world, I've tended to somehow attract a certain type of men that's just quite immature. And I'm like, okay, what's the common theme here? Like the
Mother
common
figure.
denominator.
Well, you're mature, so you reflect the mother figure. And what a lot of these guys never got to break away from the mother figure. So you bring the stability, you bring the foundational pieces they're missing. Now, I'm not saying this is the definitive, yes, this is absolutely all of it, but that goes into what I say all the time. Don't find the one, be the one. Because if you spend more time trying to find the one, you're playing the lottery game. And the likelihood that you're going to resent that person once you realize who they actually are after a couple of years is so much higher than it would be than you being the person. Because this person that you're trying to find, all of the effort it takes you to find them is the suffrage of the process that will eventually become the weight of resentment against them when they don't live up to the higher percentage, if not total percentage, of what you expect them to be. And then the punishment phase kicks in. You're not who I want, that I'm supposed to be with. But yet the self-reflection and the self-accountability is vacuous. I didn't do anything to develop me. I'm already perfect. I'm already a great catch. I'm already everything you should want, right? You get into that whole, like, he needs to be 6 figures over 6 inches and he's got to be over 6 feet and all of this. And it's like, okay, well, these are your expectations of him. What's his expectations of you? Oh, I'm perfect. Okay, fantastic. Get on the scale. Get on the scale. On the scale of 1 to 10, how attractive are you? What financially do you bring to the relationship? What do you, as any aspect, bring to the relationship? Now, and what do we have is this massive disconnect where it's like men have such a significant weight to carry, which is also crushing for a young man that already has the deck stacked against him. Because if you think about the dating process, from the moment they hit the maturity to go into the dating scene, the girls their age will date guys older than them. They have the development of their friend circles that typically like to play video games and things that girls typically aren't as interested in. So the girls are dating the older guys that are established or have money, and then they're getting the imprint of what those types of relationships should be. So being able to have the money to go on nice dates and to do things, go on trips. And they're like, you know what, let me date a guy my age. Then they try, and immediately there's a failure process because he can't get her to go to these things because he doesn't have those earnings because he hasn't had enough time in the business world. Now, because she can skip decades and experience life, but he can't typically, unless they find like, you know, the cougar, right? The mother figure, but they're usually not the guys that go to date the same age girls, right? And to me, in my anecdotal experience, it's more of the guys are stuck in that time frame where they become, it's challenging for them to find dates and actually have successful relationships. But the girls can easily reach into generations, you know, into another generation and have a successful relationship. Now, a girl in her 20s dating a guy in his 30s is not an uncommon thing.
Right.
But it's not as common to hear about a guy in his 20s dating a woman in his her 30s. Now, I'm not saying doesn't happen, just the common time frames. So there's so many challenges that we face when it comes to actually having these healthy relationships. So when it's like you can't find a good man, it's because society is not allowing good men to foster. You know, we're restricting their growth and opportunities by telling them that everything about being a good man is a bad thing. You know, holding a door open for a woman. Now women chastise men for doing that, chastise them for holding it and chastise them for not holding it. It's like, you can't even make a decision. You know, and it's like, how do you develop yourself whenever the things that are the attractive traits that women look for are shunned by society, but yet secretly women want it, but openly and their philosophical views of life, they can't speak for it. No, so they can't say men should be helped. They should get support. No, you know, it goes down to the point where a boy and a girl, or a guy and a man and a woman have the exact same amount to drink. But if there's a decision made to be together, the guy is the one that bears the burden of that decision if it ever gets to a legal conversation. It never goes towards her. And people would laugh at it if it did. But if it goes towards him, now he is social pariah and he needs to be locked away for life. But she doesn't have those same responsibilities and or accountability. So, and I'm not saying like there's always going to be nuances, but to say as far as this society has gone, we have created an environment that is going to make a lot of lonely people because they can't connect. And then they're going to reach for the pets and they're going to want to have those as their companions and then be angry at the world that they don't have the fulfilling experience. When they wake up in the morning, they have their partner next to them.
Well, and no wonder men are getting addicted to Xbox games and pornography and all these points of isolation and disconnect, and, you know, social media that's supposed to connect us all, but it's actually disconnecting us all more because we're not having real human connection and interaction, right? So it's this feeding of the cycle. You know, you have some of these negative in-person interactions and then they're like, screw it, I'm just going to go jerk off to a screen and that feels better, it's easier, right? And then but that creates habit and a pattern and a way of life that isn't conducive to becoming the quality of man that a high quality woman would want. And so it's, you know, and then with the women, you know, we have our own issues with that too. All these women who are putting themselves out there on social media and putting their bodies on display and everything. It's like, that's just as damaging to their person and their confidence and their dignity. They're being shouted at by other women being like, go girl, you're confident, you know, this is loving yourself. And it's like, no, it's really not. You know, and that's a realm that I've been really intentional with myself of not posting those types of photos and videos because I've kind of known all along. Of course, I've had the desire for the attention. And that's, I think, what women are wired for too, is the attention. Men like the visual lusting aspect of things, and women like receiving the attention and the affirmation. And why wouldn't a person want that? Like, our egos want that. And it's difficult to be a woman at this time and not join the crowd and put that out there maybe if I put myself out there, then maybe then I'll find a guy. It's like, but that's not the kind of guy that I would be interested in. is that, and from my perspective too, it's like, then that would be a guy, maybe he's just interested in how I look versus who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of that thing too, is, for women, you can do that while you're young, but beauty ages, beauty fades. You've only got so much time when you can be in the spotlight like that before the next generation comes up and steals the spotlight. And then where are you at with your confidence? And then where are you at? Because you've been placing your worth and your confidence in the opinions of others. And when that attention goes, or it starts turning sour, where are you at? Is that going to bring you down? And so like, this goes for the men and the women. Men's version of that would be like, how many chicks can I get? Right. And then when they start aging or gain too much weight or whatever, they're not as attractive as they used to be. And then the attention starts going to the younger generation. It's the same kind of thing. Are you putting your worth in others' want of you versus your own self-worth? And my personal life now is my worth in God and in my faith. And that's something that is new. And I'll say my last relationship, I met him on a dating app. And on the apps, you can put your spirituality, and he put agnostic. And I was like, perfect. Because at that time I was like, I don't want someone who's had the same church history as me, like screw all that. And that relationship, I'm so grateful for it, because gosh, it was so anxiety ridden for me, but there were so many good things, but so many like very difficult and toxic aspects to it as well. And by the time I cut it off, I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, never again will I put myself in that position. And what that brought me to was, I was on some level trying to find my worth in my relationship from a man. And, really everything's boiling down to, there's no human on earth who can give me that. And I can't even fully give myself that. And what I'm discovering is that I can really only truly experience unconditional love and worth in God. And gosh, this sounds so preachy, and it's like so cringy, because this is like everything that I came from that I was like, never again.
Right.
And it's so, I swear God has a sense of humor, because it's like all these things that I'm like, I absolutely wanted to reject and not turn towards. Now he was like patiently waiting for me in the background. Like, I'll be here when you're ready. When you hit your emotional rock bottom, I'll be here, and patiently waiting. And I turn around and he's just like, welcome home, and it's humbling. It's really humbling, because everything, I hated the label. I hate how it's looked at in society. It's just, it feels awkward and isolating in some aspects. But gosh, as soon as I made that choice to turn around, I told a friend of mine, choosing to turn around and explore faith again after the church trauma that I had dealt with growing up. I said, it felt like looking down the barrel of a shotgun and hoping that I didn't. And that's how difficult it was for me to turn around and even explore this. And I've been so gently handled in this process that it's allowed me to continue moving forward. And I've reached out and had conversations with a handful of people that are further down the faith path than me, and just asking questions and, getting some support and love along that journey has been amazing. And one thing I wanted to share too, for anyone who's interested, this book, The Shack, if you've not read it or haven't heard about it, this was the turning point for me. Quick plug for this book. It's the first book that I read that had like religious aspects to it in over a decade. And it was recommended to me by a friend of mine who had listened to where I was at and what I was struggling with in life and what I was seeking. And he was like, you should check out this book. And so I read it, and it's about a man's journey and a relationship with God. And he has this spiritual experience. The way that it frames who God is and how you can be in relationship with God, totally different than anything I had ever heard of in church or experienced. And after I finished reading that book, what came to mind was, gosh, had the church taught about God like that, probably never would have. So The Shack is a book that I highly recommend for anyone to check out if you're curious about what it could be like to be in a relationship with God. It's a story, so it's not like you're reading the Bible. It's a story, so it's a good story regardless. But how it depicts connection with God is something that it was new to me, where it's actual relational, and that ties back into what I do for work and everything else because it's all connected. I dove in deep to human psychology and relationship dynamics, and so everything I've learned and been teaching with humans and dogs is now coming into play in my spiritual realm of, I get to actually be in relationship with God, and that's different than the checklist to be a Christian that I grew up with. If you have to do these things and you have to be good, and if you don't, you're going to hell. So all of the interconnectedness of maturity of like, here's the other cool thing. You can mature in one area and it's going to help you on your maturity in another area. And there are some things that you have to, focus on and spend time learning. But if you start mastering one area, that's going to help you expect the process in another.
You sound like you've been studying this for a bit.
A little bit.
It sounds like you've been studying what I've been up to, because that's exactly what I talk about. We can use our strengths against us, and we can also and there are times whenever you need to, in order to make the puzzle all come together, you have to develop in another area in order to make your ascent in the area you're really focusing on make more sense and to become more fruitful. So what a beautiful thing. And something else that's coming to mind is you're talking about, and there's the resentment of the foundation of religion that you were given, right? The teachers that taught the foundation. We're all so incredibly dynamic. I'm sure that you have been privileged to sitting in a room learning something from somebody that you already felt that you knew, and it left you with less value, right? Because you're like, I'm not learning anything new here. I'm hearing more of what I already know. And then there's times you're in a room where you're hearing something that conflicts with what you know, and it gives you that cognitive dissonance if you allow it to continue to be funneled in, right? So you get that real uncomfortable defensive posturing in yourself and all of that. And then you have the other times you're like, this doesn't click. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
It's because of all of the dynamics that make a human being the way that they are. Your foundation of what you understand with religion by who taught it was just more of the kind of the structure of standardized public school. It doesn't work for everybody, but it does set the foundation that life can work from in the society that we have, so that you can go outside of that and then mold it in a way that actually works in a more fulfilling way for you. So the beautiful thing about what you went through is, by contrast, now you can identify what does resonate better for you. But how you were brought up is what will work for other people, not everyone, but specific people. And if they're not introduced to it, it can help create that introduction to God in a way that really does click and works. Because that's a beautiful thing about human beings. We're so dynamic. There is no one way to do this. There's a lot of ways to success, and there's a lot of ways to doom, right? Heaven on earth or hell on earth, we create it by the choices that we make and the life that we live into. So even your heaven right now could be hell tomorrow, right? Like, especially for the people that don't have the long-term views, which is what spirituality or purpose gives us, which is the eighth area of maturity. That gives you the ability to see at such a distance that you pay attention to the steps that are getting you there, versus the person that gives into hedonism, which hedonism is really about right now sensation and release, right? The pleasures that this moment can bring me. But the pleasures that this moment can bring me is, diabetes. It could bring the collapse of a current relationship. It could bring financial doom, or you could get fired tomorrow because of you acting out or doing whatever you're doing, or the consequences of your health could be challenged beyond just diabetes, right? So it's a beautiful thing when we look at it in a way that tells us that we can really come up with something that works for us. So what you were brought up in is now time has given you the privilege to look back, scrutinize, and say, I kind of resent specific values of it, right? The checklist they gave you. Well,
Right.
Modern education, public schools predominantly is checklist is the way it's made, right? Because it's got to fit the general public. But
Though
for
I
you,
did get a public school experience, just not just through the church, not through the
right?
school system.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you got a version of it, right? Which is just
Yeah.
it's an educational system, you know. And
Yeah.
it's fascinating because like the goal that we all have is that you're a teacher, right? Like you as a whole, you are more marked as a teacher in life than you are of some other occupation, because you
Yes.
teach people how to interact with their pets, and you teach pets how to interact with their people, and you teach people how to interact with people. Because when your pet owners are around other people, how do they engage those people in a way that do not trigger their pets or trigger them in a way that affects their pet, right? So you have that dynamic, but you're a teacher. Now
Yeah.
it's a matter of what is it that you do with life now, knowing that you're a teacher. So, because not all teachers work in four walls, right?
Yeah.
And usually a teacher is also marked by wisdom. That is what antiquity has intended for us. But if you look back to antiquity, that's exactly what we were putting together. You know, in the first civilizations, the Greeks and the Romans and all of that, they usually moved the wisdom to the teaching side and the warriors to the warrior side, right? So, but doesn't mean you don't have the warrior spirit.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, I train jujitsu, so that's a sport that I've gotten into since it started in 2019. I'm currently a blue belt and loving it. I just had my second competition ever, and it was a lot of fun. So a lot of learning to be had too, and that's the physical maturity realm as well as
Yes.
community.
Yep.
You know, and you can loop it into spirituality. So I do have my warrior side. You know, and it's been something that's been a huge boost in my confidence. So the emotional aspect of things, I mean, it's intimidating, and it's a very physically intimate sport where you're wrestling with people on the ground. So, you know, getting comfortable in people's spaces, also being respectful and making sure you're trying not to hurt them and they're not trying to hurt you while you're also trying to choke them out. It's a lot of fun, and I really do encourage people to give it a try.
Absolutely.
But you talking about the teacher and the wisdom side of things, another book plug real quick that I just read, The Servant, a simple story about the true essence of leadership. And this one also comes in story form, which is really helpful because humans learn best through stories. But it really breaks down some really cool aspects of leadership, and it's not just applicable to people in like traditional leadership roles, corporate leadership or whatnot. It's how you live your life and lead your own life, and then how you are in every relationship, whether it's business or personal. So huge recommendation for this book. And that played into, you know, as a teacher, how I navigate life. Part of what that book teaches and what I've been embodying or attempting to embody is leading by example, living my own life in such a way, being the OG influencer. Like, what is it to influence? It's not a bunch of, you know, artsy pictures on Instagram. It's how I model my own life, and people observe that and see like, oh, I want some of that, or I want to be able to do that. Or I want to live with my dog like that. I want to be able to, like, they can see the relational connection with my dog. They can see how my dog stays in tune with me without me even telling him to do anything. And they're like, how do you get that? That's relationship, but that's something that I can model because I have put that effort in my own life. And so, and then people see that and they see what's possible. And you know, then I get to guide them through like, well, here's a way to go about doing that. So I love teaching too, because I know what I teach is applicable to so much more than just their interactions with their dog. I've had so many people tell me like, I wish I would have met you before I had kids. You know, like this stuff would be great for my kids. I've had clients in the past follow up with me a couple years after working with me and say, I got promoted at work because of what I learned from you with regards to leadership. and with my dog. And then they applied it to work and they got promoted. Like really cool stuff. So I think that's another part of maturity in life, is not just doing things because you're supposed to do it, but like who you are, embody it, and really being intentional about. One of my favorite mental games to play with myself when I'm at a crossroads of a decision or the direction in my life, when I take a step back and look at my life and its trajectory, is if you were a character in a book and you were writing your story, what would you want your character to do next? Or how would you want your character to handle this particular situation? What would make that character the hero? And then do that. It's
What a
not
great
always
way to-
easy.
Right. What a great way to put, to actually start framing a narrative on the way you do your life. Right. Something to bring up though, and not to interrupt, but as you introduce the servant, it is only you and I in the recording, but a little bubble thing came up with a thumbs down.
Oh,
to
that
the
was
book. Yeah. So that popped up. There it is again. So I guess it's actually an AI gesture, really a reading of behavior, and you putting your hand in that position. Just so everybody's clear that's watching the video, neither one of us are thumbs downing the book. Yeah, let's see if we can do a thumbs up on that one. There we go.
2 thumbs up.
Okay,
Fireworks.
fantastic. Okay, so apparently it's an AI thing. So good, because I looked in here to see if there was anybody watching, because it's not. It's a private video that's being recorded. Yeah. So, okay, look, I just learned something. We got hearts. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh,
Apple.
Jesus. Yeah. What's that? Your Apple phone?
It's Apple. That's what, my laptop. So if you make the gesture of thumbs up, it'll give a thumbs up. You do thumbs down, it'll do thumbs down.
Okay.
And
all right. Okay. Good. So, all right. Yeah. Got it.
Now you learned something new.
Yeah, well, I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, okay, is there somebody that's watching the video that has access? Because technology is not sacred anymore, and I didn't want other people to think that I gave it a thumbs down when you're introducing it, because that's not the case at all. I love learning from anything, right? Because it's like you don't know who you're going to be by the time you finish the book. Something about you, if you truly pay attention when you're reading, will change to a degree. And it could be the dispelling of ignorance in a specific subject that gives you pieces that work elsewhere, not just there. So anyway, so what a great book, right? And it is like, you've made 2 references that I am very interested in actually getting into myself, because I love learning. And for me, I have lived long enough to realize that I know little to nothing. And the greatest benefit that I could ever create with another person is to let them have the podium. Because they're the ones that can teach me something. I know what I know, and I will complement, and I want to be able to give the podium to people that really are out to make a difference, right? Like you are not just living your life. You're living your life to be an example that other people could live by, but you're not living your life for that as much as it is in combination with the fact you're just living your life, but you're that level of responsible. And for me, those are the people I platform. I want to help get more of them out there so that you can, it's not about creating celebrities. It's about creating intentional people and creating opportunities for intentional people, because we will do better once we understand, yes, diversity is great, but what kind of diversity? And the diversity that I like is the diversity of maturity, not the immaturity that's being platformed at the moment. Social media has outpaced our ability to mature. Kids have more time to play on it and more area of focus and more capacity of focus than do their parents. And their concerns and their interests are different. So children are running wild with social media with little to no guidance. It's like a Toys R Us it's like a Chuck E. Cheese, but the kids got into the beer. They're running around in pandemonium, and the parents are still trying to figure out where to park. And it's so what are we going to do to make the difference? Is we have to create this is how your life will work better or more fulfilling by people like you, which is you're not somebody that people can't relate to. But I will tell you, the people that can't relate with you or both have a very challenging time relating to you. And those are the people that have a life of chaos. that are so caught up in the hedonistic relief, or the benefits of hedonism, that your life is not one that they're going to idolize, because they're still stuck in that instant gratification. Now, when they hit their next stress point and they're like, okay, maybe there's a different way of doing this life because I'm tired of what I'm doing, then you become their inspiration. You're a solid, wonderful female role model, right? So you've played in the world that they get to experience enough to go, that is not for me. You lost a little piece of you when you tried modern dating and the way that people are encouraging modern dating. So we now have a truly strong woman, because a woman that has a blue belt in jiu-jitsu is like a female attorney making partner, right? Like you're on your way to become partner in a law firm. You do not mess with that woman, because she is a badass, right? Because she's gone through it all, especially she has kids and did it. No, because then she is the one that you do not want her walking in the room against you, right?
Right.
So because of all of the challenges it takes to get to that place, right? So a woman that goes through jiu-jitsu and still lives the way that you do is incredibly inspiring. And
thank you.
For me, platform you, right? Give an opportunity for your voice to be heard and your story. These are not one-time videos and that's it. You know, these right now, this is just, let's introduce Kinsey to the world, right? From not the world, I'm not that big of a podcast, right? But my goal is to make something that really does last. I'm not going to tell people how to live their life. I can't do that. God hasn't given me that right. Right. And I probably should have that conversation before we end too, just because it's a place that we had discussed several times, and Ken has known me when I was in my atheist phase. So we'll get to that in just a second, but it's not my place to tell people how to live their life. I'm not here to preach. That's not my thing. I like to inspire people, and I'm so incredibly curious because I want to learn from everybody, because my life is not long enough to actually have the experiences that I'm driven to have. It won't be long enough for that. But if I connect with others, you'll share your story with me. And when that story is shared, I will have the ability to live another life. Now, in some of those things I will physically do in this life, and other things will be like, I get it. I've been there by proxy. So with that, go ahead.
Can I add something on this?
Yes, please.
Moment where you're talking about wanting to inspire and not trying to tell people how to live their life. I mean, I so agree with that, because I have the personality type where it's like, don't tell me what to do. I'll make my own decision. And sometimes I have to touch the hot stove before I realize, right? I do try to pride myself in saying, like, I like to observe and watch other people live life and make their mistakes so that I don't fall into the same pit holes as other people do. And that has created a lot of wisdom, and just by observing. But there are some things in life you have to experience yourself before you really gain your own personal wisdom. But there's this quote that I want to share, because it really talks about choosing your hard, and maybe you've heard it before too, but it really resonated with me, and I think it fits here. It just goes through this list of different aspects of life. So marriage is hard, divorce is hard, choose your hard. Obesity is hard. Being fit is hard. Choose your hard. Being in debt is hard. Being financially disciplined is hard. Choose your hard. Communication is hard. Not communicating is hard. Choose your hard. Life will never be easy. It will always be hard. Choose your hard.
Yeah.
And that is like, put that on a wall, right? Because life is always going to have its difficulties and challenges, and you just get to pick which one. And I'm doing my best to pick the ones that are going to end up providing the most fulfillment and happiness and joy at the end of the day.
Yeah. Mine's, so with that, familiar, but it's not hard. It's suck. So pick your suck, right?
Yeah.
This is going to suck. That's going to suck. Pick it. Right. With the marriage or divorce, it's also being alone is hard. So, and you're not driven to be alone. None of us are. We're communal creatures, and we're partner driven creatures. So, and that does bring us into the other conversation, which is, it is pick your hard. If you choose to have a non-religion, pick your hard. If you choose to have a religion, pick your hard, right? Or pick your suck, and it's because it's going to suck, right? And everything is going to suck until it doesn't. But when it doesn't, is called mastery. When you get there, you're so disciplined that you forget that what you're doing sucks, because now you're getting the newness of having consistent reward from your actions than it is to have the consistent disappointment or shortfall of the action, not achieving the goal yet. And that sucks. Even though you're making progress, it's not the same as when you finally get there. And it's also that phenomena we get when we do get there, we don't recognize we are there because we're so conditioned into the habit and the behavior of struggle that when you finally do get there, you're like, I thought it would be different. Well, yeah, you conceived it before you understood the work. You just knew the outcome because you saw somebody else with the outcome, or you envisioned this fantasy of the outcome. It's not the reality of it. You have to condition yourself through the work. And that's why we lose sight of it, because then we become conditioned to the work, and that's the ones that are successful because they just keep working on it. But then it comes to it's almost a Greek tragedy in itself, because when you do get there, it's like finance. If you solely focus on finance to become successful, and your whole idea about success is finance, most people don't have a number necessarily. They just have a ballpark. Well, what is financial success to you? Is it $52,000 in your bank account? Is it 52 million? Is it 52 billion? Right? They don't have the exact number, but they'll have a ballpark.
Yeah.
If you don't even know when you got there.
Yep.
And you'll learn along the way, as you condition yourself through the suck, that you actually start to get addicted to the suck, because you see the behaviors that you've gotten better at over time. And before you know it, you don't want to lose those skills. But if you solely focus on finance, by the time you get to what you would conceive as success, you're probably going to die and your family will spend that money, but they don't have the discipline to create it. So therefore goes the curse of generational wealth. New wealth is lost within 3 generations. Old wealth is conditioned because they do something different and they do something more holistic. So that's that part. Anything to say about that before I move into the religious piece? Because I want to talk about that before we end.
Yeah, and I definitely want to hear that too. I have a segment of the servant book I actually kind of read here because I think it fits into the whole conversation too. If that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so it's a 4-phase part of building habits, good and bad. And this is like a framework to place yourself of like where you're at. And I'm now of the philosophy in my life where I always want to be putting myself in positions of learning something new so that I'm in the process of being a beginner and sucking at something and learning and growing, because there's so much power in being humble enough to make mistakes and learn how to continue to be creative and try new things, which is why I love jujitsu so much, because it's never ending. And once you get to black belt, like there's still a world of things to learn. So like you're never done learning if you go through life with that mentality. So you've never made it. So point number 1 or stage number 1 is unconscious and unskilled. So this person is unaware and therefore unskilled in the habit. So that's phase 1. Phase 2, conscious and unskilled. So now this person is aware, but not good at it. This is the awkward stage that must be pushed through. Then we have conscious and skilled. The person is aware and starting to become skilled. And then we have unconscious skilled, is now drilled into your game, and you don't have to try to be a good leader. You are a good leader, or whatever skill it is that you're going for. So when you talked about reaching a certain point and then you just sort of get stuck in that could be like the detriment of getting to a point where it's unconscious that you're just skilled in doing it. And that's why I think it's so important to always be putting yourself in positions in life to be learning something new, so that you're going through those stages and maturing as a person as an outcome of that.
I love that we keep using that same term.
Yeah.
Maturity. It's such a great thing. And thank you, by the way, for using that and bringing that excerpt out. Yeah, because it's such a profound way of looking at it, because it adds the details that's necessary for people to truly qualify what's being stated versus the vagueness of bracket or categorical communication. Which is more what I did, and then you gave the details that actually give it something more body to it.
Yeah. The other factor of it that I really like is it allows you to give yourself grace in the process. Because
Hmm.
if you are a struggling perfectionist,
Hmm.
and you're not doing the skill that you're trying to learn well right away, it's easy to get down on yourself or get frustrated or upset when it's like, no, there's a process to this, and give yourself grace. When you start a new venture of maturity in your life, pick a realm, and you start to focus on it for the first time ever or in a long time, these things don't change overnight. And so that whole 4-phase thing, just check in with yourself and be like, oh yeah, I'm now at the phase where I'm conscious and unskilled, but I'll get there. Don't give up, and don't shit on yourself, excuse the
Right.
language, but it's okay to not be perfect at it and continue moving forward, because I don't think you're ever going to be perfect at anything, but that the point is to keep striving for perfection.
Yeah. And that to me is such a great process to fall in love with, right? When you can
Yeah.
fall in love with that, you can fall in love with life.
Yeah.
So, and now that is the kind of fulfillment. Something to mention that we had talked about earlier is one of the things that a lot of modern relationships are lacking, and that is the play of being with your partner. Most people do not have play. They have the resume, they have the interview, it's the audition for the relationship, but they don't know how to transition into the play of being with the person. Or they
Yeah.
forget the play of being with the person because they get too serious about life, and they forget that it does require that we play with our partners too. One of the things that I always thought was kind of funny is, what does it look like, or what is it like to flirt with your partner when you're having sex? Right? Like
Huh.
flirting is something we do right? And as we're getting
Yeah.
to know somebody, we flirt. But what is it like to actually, or how awkward would it be if you were flirting with your partner during sex? Right? Like how ridiculous would that be? It's like, you know what?
Yeah.
I kind of like you. You're cute, or you're really pretty, or my gosh, or like whatever that flirt game is. But
Yeah.
then it hit me somewhat recently, and I'm like, well, you don't call it flirting, you call it playing. It's
Mhm.
flow. It's being with your partner, but just strip down all of the social belief of yourself and just be with that person. And
Yeah.
that's where you get to that flow, where you feel like you're one, because it's the world disappears. But we lack that in modern relationships. The world disappears because their experience of the greatest relief thereafter is accomplished, but not the long-term relief of being with
Mhm.
somebody that is truly there with you. And we just lack that as like a common, like nobody's creating an awareness to this.
Okay, so play is a whole topic, because even in the dog realm, there's so much neurobiology to this,
Uh-huh.
and humans experience it too. And I think we get so stuck in the work grind and everything,
Mhm.
that and the stresses of life, that we don't practice play. But also with our nervous system and how things are set up, like if you don't feel safe or if you're overly stressed, you won't be able to play. You won't be able to shift into that place in your brain. The same thing is for dogs. Play
Mhm.
can be used for rehabilitation, but if I've got a dog that's overly fearful, I'm not starting day one trying to play with that dog. I will build up towards that, but that takes an evolution of setting the stage for safety and trust and respect. And out of that can come play. And I think some relationships, start playful, and then life gets serious. And then, there's some unresolved conflict in the relationship. And then they can't really readily get into the play mentality because of these other lack of trust or lack of respect and resentment that builds up. And that's an inhibitor to getting into
Mhm.
that playful state. So that's something where maybe, people listening, it's like if you find yourself in that place, maybe take a look at what needs to be resolved in order to feel like you can get into that emotional state of being playful.
Yeah.
And so it's a topic that I find really fascinating and interesting. And I
I
think
have
you're
a
totally right. If
I have a
people were
shameless
to,
plug.
you have a shameless plug.
I
Okay,
have a
good.
shameless plug
Yeah,
here. That is my relationship seminar, my relationship course that I have. Is it actually
amazing.
gets into that. So yeah, it gets into that, and it gets into what kind of relationship are you actually creating, not what you're inheriting. And how do you
Yes.
create a powerful relationship of your own intentions? So, and play is necessary, because when you're with somebody and you're letting it kind of go and you don't have a strategy for fulfillment, that's
Yep.
where life will happen. It'll get stale. And before you know it, 2 or 3 years later, there's no excitement in the bedroom. It's all fallen to the point where it's like roommates. And that's so
Yep.
incredibly common. So shameless plug.
I'll say this too. I mean, that sounds amazing. And I think another piece to it could be, maybe you cover this, maybe you don't, but as an individual, the greater person, the greater you may need to learn how to play by yourself first, because I am a person that really struggled with it. So that can track back to it. It's not that I never could play, but play was not something that was really fostered in a healthy way in my childhood. It was always quit being goofy, go do the chores. That the most playful type behavior that I had was like getting lost in a fantasy book, because in that world there was play, but I wasn't allowed to be a goofy kid. It was like, you be productive, you be responsible, you clean the house, which is what created a workaholic tendency, right? Because those were the character traits that were positively, paid attention to. Was like, oh wow, you did a good job, or you accomplished this thing. So I had to learn how to play. I had to experiment with, well, what do I enjoy? What is fun? Right. Like, that was a phase for me, which is crazy to think about as an adult, that like, oh, I don't really know how to play. And even to this day, I would say like I do much better, but like I'm not the most just lighthearted, goofy person. You called me a stoic earlier on, and I think some of that is based in trauma. But there's benefits that it has its own attributes that are good, but play is so important as an individual, so that you can then bring that to a relationship as well.
Yeah. If you expect your partner to bring the play, you will be the stale partner.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it sucks to look at it that way, but embrace your suck. Right.
Yeah.
If you have to learn a new skill, it's not always fun. You can make it fun, but it's not always going to be that. And if you expect it to always be that, you'll find yourself disappointed. And that's where you're more likely to abandon the attempt. So it's fascinating. I actually didn't intend or expect to actually plug my relationship course, but yes, and it does have that in there. It's in the core values, and there's I, we, and all core values. That's in the I core values. It's what's important to you and what do you need to do for yourself, so your partner doesn't intrude, but they understand. And the we core values is the bringing together of both your core values in a way that you have your relationship make a stand for itself, and how you can navigate and work together without having false expectations. They don't spend enough time with me or whatever. And then the all is, what does your relationship mean to the world, and how do you expect the world to receive your relationship? That's where you codify your relationship in a way that it becomes unmessable. So people don't interfere and cause, relationship challenges that can cause it to end up, like affairs and stuff like that. So, but it all depends on the type of relationship you want to. Some people want the monogamous, some people want the ethical non-monogamous. There's a lot of different types, and it's figuring out what fits you. And by the way, what fits you today doesn't mean it'll fit you tomorrow. How do you adapt? How do you pivot? Right? Like for you, you've got a strong ability to pivot, and it doesn't matter what terrain you're in, you'll figure out how to make your business work. You're highly adaptable, which is what pivoting is. So, okay, for the final portion of the conversation today, which we can continue to go on, because I mean, you are one of those people I've always identified as, capable of continuing a very dynamic and intelligent conversation.
Thank you.
So as you've been religious pretty much your whole life, just varying degrees of the intensity of that religion, right? As you mentioned, as your husband went away from it, or your ex-husband, and you followed, and then you've come back. I was raised as a Baptist, but it wasn't like a real heavy household for religion. My father more used religion to help create somewhat of a foundation, but then also some of the benefits of the control mechanisms that can come with it as well. Not like he was overly controlling, but it was something that helped reduce his stress on a daily basis if he could guide us in such a way that we reduced his stress. So if I were to, because I don't want to make him painted out to be a villain. Enough people have done that because people don't understand others. So with that, I've always had questions that weren't answered and weren't answered well. As at 45 years old now, I can definitely understand the naivete of the youth, right? Especially as myself in my youth. Like, if God made us, who made God? The old trump card that everyone's like, oh, I gotcha. Not necessarily. Because understanding that question in itself is one that takes a lot more than a 14-year-old to understand, right? Hell, I think I had that question when I was 5-ish, something like that. But anyway, and then the other things, and how religion is taught. Like you went through and you understood that it has this checklist and it seems very controlling or, potentially manipulative, and just it seems to rob you of life's experiences in its own way, and it can create resentment. Well, I went through that, and I was introduced to an individual named Christopher Hitchens, who wrote quite a few books. It was a brilliant man. I won't take that away from him, but he had a chip on his shoulder about religion as well. He wrote the book God Is Not Good, or no, God Is Not Great, which is actually a really good book to stimulate thinking. But I would say that his conclusions in it is something that I don't agree with, like stating that God is not great, but you have to understand what God is. And so where I am now, because I was atheist for a period of time, not agnostic, but atheist. And this is when you knew me, because we even had a conversation about that in the office when I was subletting at Around the Clock Fitness. And we had a conversation about that. I haven't forgotten. Now the details as a whole, I've let go for other information, but the fact that we did have a conversation about that, we were on different sides of that. It had to do with suicide, and satisfaction, or the happiness and suicide, and the relationship there. Now that I've gone back and pursued psychology to a degree, and I can also tell you this is that this is a well-founded understanding in psychology, and it blows my mind that no one is actually giving credit to this, is that when the self-annihilation is probably the better way to do it, because Google and YouTube will reduce ranking if you have certain words, and that be one of them, is the S word, if you will. And I've already said it a couple times, won't say it anymore. But self-annihilation, when you have those go into areas that had not had prevention campaigns, it actually goes up significantly. So it doesn't go down by awareness, it goes up by awareness. So you actually get higher attempts and also successes of people self-annihilating, because of the fact that they're aware that that is a retaliation to being, put in a situation that they feel like they don't have a way out, or that they have a way of getting retribution against somebody. So it's retaliatory. So we have, and there was a strong piece about our conversation that we had then that now I would actually argue against my position then. So, but I can still understand why I had that position, and that because of the rigidity that some of these religions are taught. But I went into my atheist phase now to segue out of that self-annihilation conversation and get into kind of, it is in its own way self-annihilation by abandoning or abolishing the concept of God. As for me, it's not what we were taught. That's the best model that has survived through the centuries in order to get people to understand what this concept of God is. But why is it that it is this anthropomorphic being, right? It's something that we're made in its image, right? And we have given it specific tenets because that's a better way of teaching it than to try to teach it as this larger being. You have to give it something for people to relate to on different levels of experience in life, different levels of knowledge. There's a lot of value in how somebody understands what you're saying. So we had to make stories that were relatable enough to survive centuries and thousands of years, really. So we've come to a point where we've made certain attributes about religion or God. Well, really what you can say is religion is the specific attributes of God that is best interpreted by that group of people. So for me, it's arrogant to believe there's nothing, to be in the atheist position. It's an arrogant position. I've held it. I've lived in it. And one of the things that really woke me up, because I had this belief, and it was a very naive belief, because I gave human beings a larger degree of autonomy and better decision making for autonomy as a whole. But then the 2020 stuff happened, and we had people, like Antifa going to the streets. And I find that it's actually at that timeline, I was still had the proclamation of atheist. And the individuals that I disagree with philosophically, but yet thought I aligned with philosophically. So on a system of governance and a philosophy of life, they conflicted. And I saw the people that went to the streets that proclaimed that they were there for peace and for, overthrowing tyranny and all the rest of this stuff, actually were the tyrannical foot soldiers of a governance that I don't want reigning over myself. Or, at that time I didn't have my son, but now having my son, I don't want my son to bend the knee to that. So I realized that, well, these people, they were incredibly easy to manipulate. And they were so easy to manipulate that the life that is good that they currently live, especially relative to the world, is something that they are vehemently against and trying to destroy. And I said, well, if they were easily manipulated into this, and what they're attacking also has foundational values to something that I absolutely appreciate, which is it's more of a Christian Judeo foundation that United States holds as a foundation to be good to each other. Like, I have no choice in this conversation. I cannot align with those individuals. So then comes more of my patriotism rising. So I am a patriot of the United States, but I also care for human beings across the world. And I'm not saying that anybody who's a patriot doesn't care. We have to be salient in ourselves in order to support somebody else. The oxygen mask comes down in the plane, put it on yourself before you put it on another. What happens when you have the good life is you forget that you got to take care of yourself because you've had it to be taken for granted. So yeah. I realized the folly of my belief system. And I also realized the limitations of my knowledge, and realized how incredibly ignorant and arrogant, which is the two of those in combination, is stupidity. And I realized how stupid I was by the belief that there was a better way of conducting life than what religions can teach. Not just to say Christianity, although that's the one that I favor. But I'm not a full declared Christian. I'm more of what's referred to as a Jefferson Christian, which is take this spiritual concept of this thing that the only way to really validate it would be after this life is over. And Thomas Jefferson cut those pages from the Bible. And what was left was more of what society could work with in such a functional way that we could coexist without tearing ourselves apart like barbarians or savages. So I'm more in that category, but the longer I live, the more conversations like this I have with people, the more I realize that what I believe to be a spiritual thing could also just be an interpretation of human beings that has had to be held together by the stories that survive the centuries, because you have to make those stories relatable enough to a person in order to carry that story on. It has to have the infectious value of relatability. So package it all together, and I do not in any way align with the atheist population anymore. I'm not agnostic. I am kind of in between that, and it really doesn't, I don't have a particular sect of Christianity, but I'm somewhere in the interspace between an agnostic and a Christian. So that would be the Jefferson Christian.
Yeah. Fascinating. That's a big point of self-reflection, because there's a lot of foundational aspects of identity on that element of being human. That's a big one to take.
Yeah. So spirituality as a maturity, and it is one that I absolutely took on. And I admire those that, one, you have to have the flexibility of your beliefs in order to challenge them enough. You don't abandon them, but you allow people to have conversations that touch something sacred and not be offended that it's been touched. And that is security. That is a confident person, not an insecure person. An insecure person
Yes.
would immediately lash out. They don't want that
Yep.
sacred thing touched. So,
Yep.
and it's how much resilience do you have for that? For me, allow it to be pliable enough for you to say, I see your point. And I'd like to understand more about that point. And how do you get me over there to understand it in such a way that I get you? Because that's really what a lot of people are out, is they just want other people to get them. And the more aggressive they
Mhm.
are about it is typically because they don't get enough of that to help them feel nourished, and they feel alone. And that means there's more out group instead of in group. And that means there's
Yeah.
more tribalism, which leads to warfare. And that's what I see was used against the atheist groups, is that to activate them, to make them go to the streets, to have them, which to be very direct about it. I've been in fitness my whole life. I'm fit. I've done jujitsu. I love martial arts. I'm capable of physically defending myself. But there's not a lot of people in that group that actually line up with what I see as a core principle about how I'll conduct myself and my physical maturity. And when I see people that don't have the confidence that I have in physically handling myself, which means I don't want to fight anybody, because I know what it takes to hurt somebody, which also means I know what it would take to hurt me, and I don't want to get hurt, and I don't want to hurt somebody else. My conscience doesn't want to live in that space. I don't want anybody hurt. So the lessons don't have to go to the extreme of pain to that level of injury in order to be learned. That's why I did martial arts, so that I can better control it, so you can subdue versus damage, right?
Yes.
And that's a healthy respect and maturity. But these people not having that level of awareness go from the basements or go from whatever it is they do in their life to go to the streets and start, demanding specific things that they don't even fully understand, or violence will ensue. And I'm like, you have no idea what it takes for one person who's capable of handling themselves, and how many of you they actually could hurt. But you're so caught up in the mob thinking that you're just going to do whatever it is necessary for you to get your way, which isn't even your way. You've been manipulated. You've been misled. So anyway, that's why the maturity project is so important to me, is that it helps us all come together in such a way that we can contribute to each other, regardless of how far apart we are in our ideologies. But we have to do that through a means of at least somewhat peaceful negotiations, if we're planning to do it in a large grouping. Because it's very hard to get a bunch of people that have opposing views not to want to harm each other. But to two individuals, they can see past their views and separation and actually see that there's another person trying to connect. You add more people, it creates a different dynamic. So anyway, that's my soapbox for the moment, to at least catch you up and anybody else is watching to understand whenever I do talk about my time in atheism. I spent 2014 to 2021 in that space. And aggressive reading and debating. And I feel that I have a lot to repent for. As there are people that I've turned, and they're on their own journey, and I was a part of that journey. And as I come across them, I plan to make amends in such a way that they can understand that I've learned that my journey has brought me to this place, which would be hopefully save them from the abyss that I've potentially set them in course of. So I got a lot to repent for.
I'll say something on that. I have respect for you taking responsibility for your part in that. And I'll say, I can only speak from my own life experience, but those who have influenced or harmed me, everything I've been through, especially the negative things, have all shaped me into who I am today and who I continue to grow into. And it's all working together for good. And that's something that is a biblical teaching, that God works all things together for good. And so while you may be the villain in some people's life story, I believe that can be worked for their good long term.
Yeah, I was the right stimulus for the time being. And it's the long term versus short term. But at the same time, it's for me to take ownership, and understand that it's one of the reasons why I'm so aggressive about the maturity project, about making this, something that can really make a difference for people is that it is part of my repentance. It is part of how I plan to repay and to create the right lessons without as much of the possible fallout. So, but obviously you don't want to ever completely omit the fallout because you don't understand by value of contrast, of the good times. So yeah, there's a lot to unpack with that, but it is to help bring you and I up to the same speed because, as you knew me, I wasn't militant in it, but I was in more of a camp of being a little more aggressive at the time because it was a newer realization. And I had a lot of the baggage that I considered to be the undesirable control mechanisms, that some of that was transferred from my experience from my father. And then the others being that, it was the particular church that I went to and, and some of the people that helped me understand life and the way they explain life using religious teaching that was outside of the church, but yet still in a society or a town or in my particular community that had predominant religious overtones. So, and how they helped me understand things. So that created a bit of resentment at times too. And now I can see on a mature perspective, the gift they were trying to give me, but their ability to connect with me in that gift was different. I wasn't able to perceive it the same.
Yeah.
So yeah. Well,
thank you for sharing that. Thank you for having the courage to speak up and stand up, because creating a platform like this, there's choices in that involve risk in a lot of ways. And, maybe it's my own personality, but being visible leaves vulnerabilities. And so, but if you have a mission for it and a purpose for it and a deeper reason for it, it gives you the courage to do that. And I just want to thank you for stepping up into your maturity and in your courage and becoming the man that you are today to be a positive influence in the world and to be a space where people can come and hopefully listen to some of what you have to say and your guests have to say and leave better for it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm on behalf of the listeners, I'll also say that they say thank you. You are a phenomenal guest, and I love finding people that are like you to platform, because you guys are great and your story is inspiring. And it's a wonderful thing to experience this. There are plenty of people that they just are looking for something to spark their purpose, to get them to realize, because to me, your purpose has always been there. There's just too much static between it and you. And that's the static of trying to figure out how to live. But once you realize where your purpose is, the static starts to disappear and the clarity of the flow of living in that direction becomes apparent. So it's people like you that help bring that out. So thank you for that. You're fantastic. And
thank you.
As I mentioned the same to a previous guest as I will to you, is that you stand out, and you stand out for the reasons that you do. And identifying that is a wonderful thing. So where could people find you? Do you want anyone to find you? How do you want to be known from this episode? Do you want to put out an email, website, social media, or just tell people to cherish this video and put it in their favorites and listen to it all the time? Like, which way, how would you like to leave yourself as an imprint on this one?
Hey, if you guys want to follow my Instagram, my business Instagram, that's the way to connect to and help a small business out. It's at Canine Conversations _ and it's the word canine spelled out. And it's got a little logo with what looks like a husky with a brain on one half of its side. So it looks kind of cool, but you can find me on Instagram. That's a good place. I'm also on Facebook. And so, I'm happy to chat with anyone who may have questions or, want to talk about anything about life. I'm happy to help. So part of my current mission in life is, while I'm seeking it in my own life, is building connection and community. I want to be able to give back because I've been receiving a lot of support and love from people in my life. And I'm happy to offer that to those who need it as well.
I love it. So where can we find you then? I'll put it in the
Um,
description. I'll have you send it over to put it in the description. But for them that's watching or listening, like, how will we
yeah,
find you?
the Instagram, my Canine Conversations Instagram would be a good place to
Okay.
find me.
Canine Conversations Instagram.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Wonderful. Well, Kinsey, thank you so much. You've been fantastic. This is not the only. I have found that people, when they do the videos with me or they do these recordings, something else comes up or they start looking at life a little different. Like if you start qualifying the 8 areas of maturity, they start seeing life differently and they start
Yeah.
qualifying where their interactions with other people are associated with degrees of maturity. And before you know it, that person that's 40 something years old, losing their mind at the gas station, now you can see the 8-year-old that was left abandoned at some point in time and they didn't get to grow. Now, and they're like, I get you. I understand. And then it takes away that you shouldn't act this way. And you start looking at it going, I get it. Now, and what can you do to have a positive interaction versus a defensive interaction? So, yeah. And the same thing in the dating world. I'm sure you'll find some wonderful experiences as you continue to explore. Yep. I think we're going to see a rising of people that, no pun intended with the last name. But I do feel that we're going to see a rising of people that actually have more purpose inside of their dating. And if people want to find out how to become more purposeful, by all means, they're welcome to find out more about my relationship course. And that is, they can send me an email at yourmaturityproject@gmail.com, YOUR maturityproject@gmail.com. Subscribe to the channel. We're going to come out with more and more videos like this, especially as my studio gets built, so others can contribute to that as well. So anything at all in closing, any final thoughts, anything you want to give to anybody on your way out?
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you for listening. And I hope that I've done something to help pay it forward and at least give an example of life's not perfect. There's all those ups and downs, but don't give up. And if you're seeking and you're finding that you're not getting the results you're looking for, look somewhere else. And you might find what you're looking for, even if it's an unlikely place.
Yeah. Like they say, set the book down, walk away for a second, then come and pick it up again. You find out that you actually see things a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, well, I'm Chad Everett Brochures. This is the Maturity Project. I'm so grateful for my guest, Kinsey Rising, and this has been a great conversation. So for you that have not subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification so you know when these videos are coming out. If you do find that you'd like to be a guest on the channel, especially now that I've gotten all the stuff in my personal life taken care of, like selling the house, send me an email or message me on my Facebook account, or you can leave a comment in the comment section on YouTube. The Maturity Project. Just let me know what your thoughts are, what you'd like to discuss, and what areas of maturity, right? Throwing out the hearts. Yeah.
Yes.
So just know that yesterday's mistakes are opportunity for tomorrow's success. And if you look at life that way, you'll always have opportunity. So thank you all. Thank you so much. And let's get up to something. Let's get up to it together. Let's go.
Have a great day.